Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bikini and the Brain. I'm here with the lovely Ashley Cotwalser, of course.
Hello, everyone.
Loving the lipstick today. I just noticed it's like
Thank
shiny
you.
metallic
Yeah,
lipstick.
it's a matte chrome lipstick.
Ah, you gotta tell the people about that because that's something I haven't seen. Yeah.
Having fun with it. Having fun.
So we are talking about intuitive eating today.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we're both quite intuitive on the eatings.
Yes. And I would intuitively say, Adam, email.
Oh, yes, correct. You got to pull that up.
But so intuitive eating, I think a lot of people think they know what it is, but maybe they were misled because it might be a little more to what you think, but also there's some people that weren't really meant to be intuitive eaters and some that need a little more structure. So we'll go into all of that.
Yeah, and it's also situational and
Exactly.
type of thing. It's funny. There's so many like for people and not for people on this
Yes.
one. It's funny how some people really get a benefit from it and some people really get hit from it too.
Yes, but those people that aren't meant for it, maybe someday you can be.
Yeah.
And I think this podcast will help you with that.
Yeah, and it's just some background. I've been doing intuitive eating pretty much since I stopped competing, which was I don't remember how many years ago I stopped competing. I asked Tori. We did it, the last show I did. I think I did it with her. Yeah, it was like 5 years or something like that. So it's been a while since I've been kind of doing 5.
More than 5.
Is it more? How many years is it? What was the year?
Because 20? You weren't competing when I signed with you.
20.
Signed up with you.
I think it was that year then, 2017. So 7 years, 8 years.
Okay. You must have just gotten done then because I don't remember you ever competing.
Maybe it was 16. I don't know. I have to look.
Probably was 16.
It's funny. I just when I moved, I don't have as much space, and I like threw all my trophies away. I had boxes of them and stuff. Yeah. I was like, I'm not gonna ever put them up. Memories are in my head. It's what I need. So okay, so it's been a while then. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. So, all right. Well, what do we got to start, Ashley?
Let's talk about what intuitive eating actually is. So many would consider this to be a flexible approach to eating based on hunger, fullness, and satisfaction rather than strict diet rules. A highlight its contrast with traditional bodybuilding diets. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to emphasize tracking and rigidity versus the looseness, the more play it by earness of intuitive eating.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that when you're doing a bodybuilding diet for a very long period of time, or maybe just through prep, people feel like they're so trapped in this box. They're like, I can only eat at my Tupperware. I can only do this. And really bodybuilding, if you're bodybuilding for a long time and prepping for a long time, I find that people that are really dedicated when they intuitively eat, they don't go off as much as people think they will.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of having that freedom where it makes them feel normal, where you feel like you're normal. But I have a lot of clients when they go on vacation, I'll tell them, hey, intuitively eat, have fun with it, eyeball your protein, which is what you do, eyeball your protein. And then they go on vacation. And a lot of times, this is really funny. A lot of times when they're eating high calories, like if they're in a off season and they're in like gaining calories and their calories are a little bit higher, a lot of times they come back and they lose weight. That's the funniest thing because they have this freedom, but because they know they have this freedom, they're not actually going crazy. Like it's just, they just wanted the freedom, and they got it. And they're like, oh, I underate. I had a hard time eating. I just wasn't hungry, and that's what intuitive eating is a lot. Is it's just about your hunger cues and whatnot. Like I just wasn't as hungry. I ate my meals and I just underate. But then you have people who are dieting and they're already hungry because they've been dieting. Those are the ones where they end up going usually gaining weight, right? So it's funny how you see it, and it's based on like the hunger cues of these people. But a lot of times, I would say more times than not, when I have a client who's gaining and they go on vacation, I'm like, hey, just intuitively eat for the week. Make sure you eyeball your protein. Make sure you get that at least, and then just kind of do what you want. Don't go crazy. And then they come back and they lose a pound. They lose 2 pounds, and I'm like, oh, that's what happens. It's kind of crazy, right? How that you would think that everyone who just gets that first week of intuitive eating, they just go nuts, but it's very situational.
Yeah, definitely. There's a certain type of person for it and some that aren't really meant for that. So I think we need to go into the people that maybe should stay away from intuitive eating. So as we said, this isn't going to be for everyone, but that doesn't mean that eventually maybe this will be you. I think like when I first started prepping, I probably wouldn't have been able to do this. I can do this now for sure, but like in the beginning, no. And a few reasons why. Well, one, as a beginner, you're very unaware and uneducated about nutrition and how many calories are in what. So you could look at a cookie and think, oh, this is 90 calories, but in reality, it's 490 calories. So having that nutritional knowledge is super important. So if you're a beginner and you're just finding your way, this is obviously not going to be for you. You need more structure as a beginner until you get the hang of things.
Yeah, I would say in the scenario I was explaining earlier, when I'm telling someone, hey, and eat intuitively during this time, during this whatever, Christmas to New Year's, vacation, it's my more seasoned, more advanced people who've been doing this for a while and have a real good grasp on nutrition at that point. So
Right.
yeah, and they're successful with it, and it's pretty seamless for most of them. So yeah,
Absolutely. So another type of person that should stay away from this is obviously athletes in prep. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're 2 weeks out from the show. I don't know if it's a good idea just to let your hunger cues guide you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really going to help you meet your goals
Yeah.
because a lot of times you're going to want a lot of things that you can't eat.
I just need, if you guys are prepping for shows, you guys just need to come to the reality. You're going to be hungry. There's
Yes.
no way around that. Like that's just like that is just your state of being for, you know, a majority of the, like a 16-week prep. You're going to be a little bit hungry. It is what it is. You get more used to it. You might be full after you eat your meals, but you're going to get hungry again. And that's just how the body works. When you're in a deficit, you're going to be a little bit hungry. It's just kind of your body telling you, hey, we're kind of eating away at ourselves here. Maybe you should get some fuel in us, but there's no way to get shredded without being a little bit hungry.
Yeah, yep. If it were easy, everyone would do it, as
Yep.
they say. So, yes, this would definitely be more of an off-season type situation for most, but definitely not the best idea when you're
Yeah, I would say
close to
for
a
all,
show.
actually, for all, I don't know
Yes.
anyone who's intuitively eating into a show. That would be pretty nuts. That would be, I mean, maybe there's someone out there who's just like walks, you know, that genetic person that everyone
Yeah.
hates who just walks around shredded all the time. Like, oh, I guess I should tighten up a little bit. I guess I've seen a couple of those in my career where they're just always shredded. I guess I could see a couple now that I think about it. Yeah. But they're not the norm. They're pretty rare. I've seen, like, I can think of 2 of them, like off the top of my head.
Mhm.
Yeah. In my whole career. So
Another person that should stay away from this is someone who has a history of disordered eating. So obviously that's not the best a lot of times for that situation, just because usually those people need the structure, but again, very situational. But it's one of those things you have to look at yourself and be honest, like, is this going to affect the way I think about food or not? Is it going to affect me negatively or positively?
yeah, and I think that our sport in general, you need to have a lot of self-reflection in, you know,
Yes.
because you run into it with, you got to ask yourself, can I actually do the intuitive eating? You got to ask yourself, am I really actually having a good off season, or am I giving myself an excuse to just eat more food and calling it a good off season? Like there's just so many of these like questions that you really got to be honest with yourself in this sport. And it's very easy. And you see a lot of people lying to themselves about it all the time too. So if this helps you in a way during the off season and you're able to be one of these people that can kind of detach from prep, I'm all for it. You know, I'm all for macro dieting in the off season. I'm all for, you know, intuitive eating in the off season. If you're one of those people that can actually do it, the only problem with doing like intuitive off seasons is that the data collection becomes really difficult as like a coach. So if you're, that's another scenario. I don't think we wrote that one down, but if you're someone who is really trying to track data and progress and get really far, and you're like, I want to be on the Olympia stage winner, I want to get a pro card, whatever. That's all data, like compiling data. So like Ashley coaches, I coach every week. It's very simple for the coach when we have the data. You know, it's just basically it's like you kind of turn off the human element and you say, okay, this is a software program, and calories plus cardio plus workouts plus supplements plus rest and all these things should equal X result. And if it doesn't equal X result, we have the variables that we can manipulate, right? We can change this software program to equal X result. But the biggest one is going to be the food. And when you take out that variable of nutrition and we don't know the calories and all that, it becomes very difficult to make that accurate adjustment. So when I have people that do eat intuitively and they're, you know, on vacation, whatever, you know, we usually will do their first check-in as like a baseline check-in. Okay, we're starting from here. Let's follow the menu plan again, or just macro. So we have the data, and then we can start from here and make adjustments next week based on the changes from this week to next week. Right. So that's the only thing. If you're really, really trying to get somewhere, you kind of need the data.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to also point out post show, although technically you go into off season post show, I think if you intuitively eat right after post show, that's probably also not a good time to start because your cravings will be at an all-time high at that point. So maybe this is something you would start like deep within the off season when you've already reached your maintenance and all that. So another type of person that might want to avoid this would be people with a really sensitive body type. So what do I mean by that? You've seen the type of athlete that maybe they eat something and then the next thing they know, they check in and the next day they're up 5 pounds and then the next day, oh, they're back to normal. And there's inconsistent with like maybe check-ins, and maybe it's not necessarily due to them, but their body type is just seems to be a little hypersensitive to everything. So imagine eating something that maybe you haven't had in a while and body might have a reaction to it.
Yeah. So I especially want to go into the right when you get off of a show.
Yes.
That one's huge. Just as I said earlier, the people who I have that are in deficits and then go and intuitively eat, the hunger cues are obviously going to be higher. And that's what really this intuitive eating thing is you're listening to your hunger cues. I'm eating till I'm full, basically, but I'm eating. And one of the other things is when you're eating till you're full, you're eating real food till you're full. One of the problems that you're going to have these days, especially, is that a lot of our food isn't even like real food. It's like multi-ingredient food, and it's meant to keep you hungry. It's meant to keep you eating more. It's like designed by manufacturers and food companies to like who have engineers who like engineer this stuff to make you not feel full so you eat more of the food. It's crazy, right? So single ingredient foods is going to be ideal because if you're eating chips for your intuitive eating, you're going to finish the bag of chips. Like you're not going to get super full on those foods. So one of the things with this is you're listening a lot to your hunger cues and your satiety cues. And you're basically saying, I'm eating until I'm full, a reasonable amount, but I'm going to be eating foods that are going to get me full too. That's something I think we also need to pay attention to, because you're not going to get full on certain foods for the most part. It's going to take a lot of them to get you full. If you're eating these, like boxed mixed foods with tons of ingredients. And I was seeing this meme the other day, and someone said, it said, we're always told to look at ingredients, but the foods we should be eating shouldn't have any ingredients. like, single ingredient foods, banana doesn't have an ingredient, chicken doesn't have an ingredient, just chicken. There's no ingredient list on it. It's just chicken. So, that's another thing you got to be careful with the intuitive eating. But back to someone in a deficit, I don't think that's a good time for you to go into it, because you're going to be super hungry. I would say get out of that first, get to maintenance calories before you go right into that intuitive eating, because you're going to eat everything. Like if you're going
don't trust your hunger cues at that point.
Yeah. After a show, your hunger cues are really like through the moon. you're just going to eat, period. I've been through it. It's like there's like no turning it off. It doesn't matter what you eat, you don't get full,
Mm-hmm.
So so get through that phase of it first. I know it sucks because everyone wants to just have those get out of jail free card right when you get done with the show. But get to that point. It usually takes about a month of like reversing, getting those calories up, where you're not really super hungry anymore. And then I think that would be a good time to start. But yeah, you're asking for trouble if you do it up right after the show. Yeah.
Yes. Good point there. I think one important benefit to intuitive eating is kind of reconnecting with those hunger cues again as well. Because one thing that I fear is when people are in prep, you're so used to eating like clockwork, right? You're at that point, you're eating not necessarily for taste, but because you have to, because it's on your plan. And the deeper you are in prep, it's like you become a robot a little bit. Like, I'm eating this because my plan says it, and I'm eating this next and eating this next. But sometimes athletes are eating even if they're not even hungry. Sometimes it's more of just like, oh, I have to because that's the macros on my plan for today. This is what I have to eat. And sometimes when we're in that habit and schedule and routine of just eating because our menu says it, we kind of forget what a real hunger cue feels like. And we might have a lot of cravings, but we don't know then the difference. What is the hunger craving? What is a true craving, right?
Yeah. Actually, I'm guilty of that too. Just schedule eating is what I'm guilty of.
That's what we'll call it, schedule eating.
Yeah, because when I was, super into it, I would eat that nighttime meal like right before I went to bed. I always ate that nighttime meal right before I went to bed because I was always like, well, this meal is gonna last me and have, amino acids trickle into my bloodstream for, hopefully 6 hours of my sleep period. So I always get like right before bed, I'd always eat like right before. And I still do that. Like I still be like, oh, I've recently been better about it. Like I've recently stopped like paying attention to it and started kind of just having my last meal whenever it was my last meal. But I still mentally will do that. Like if it's been too long and I had a good workout that day, I'll still be like, oh, I'll eat before bed because I probably need that. Like so it's funny and it doesn't, scientifically it doesn't make any difference of like when you eat, but it's still stuck in my head because I've done it since I was a kid. I won't be hungry, but it's been like 3 hours since I ate. I had a good workout that day. I'm like, I should probably eat because I need that recovery, So it's funny, you get stuck in these bodybuilding patterns and it's hard to break them. I mean, this is like in me since I was, 13. So it's really hard to break those patterns and you just get, but you're right. You got to be able to identify what is a want and what is a need.
Yes, there we go.
When it comes to this, because you have to go to the refrigerator and say, okay, am I actually hungry and I'm listening to my hunger cue, or am I bored, or do I just have a craving, right? Which one is it? And a lot of times, it really is, you just have a want, you don't have a need.
Yes.
And that's where we get into trouble with intuitive eating.
Yeah. That's the thing. You have to be the right person for it. And I think we should go into who can benefit from intuitive eating. What is the type of person that is, I guess, meant for this? I think first and foremost, it's someone that has really good self-control.
Yeah.
Really good self-control. Needs versus wants, but also recognizing what is what and knowing that like, okay, I have to hold off even though I want more, all that good stuff. And I think if you're good at self-control, that's the first thing that I would consider.
Yeah, I think that, and realizing, being okay with tracking your markers still too is another. Sometimes some people don't want to track their markers in their off seasons, and that's fine.
Meaning
for some,
checking in.
Yeah, checking in. Even if it's just you at home with doing your own, checking your own weight and measurements. Some people don't want to do that in the off season because they know it. I think it's a subconscious thing. Like we know we're gaining weight in the off season, but we don't want to see it. And we can kind of disconnect from it by not seeing it. And then that makes us feel a little bit better. I get it. So I've been doing this for years and I just weigh myself, every couple of days and I make sure I'm not gaining weight. If I'm gaining weight, like, all right, I better pull back on it a little bit. And if I'm not, then I keep eating the way I'm eating and I eat what I want. But I would say like 95% of the food I eat is clean. I don't have any, like, if you want to call it bad foods, in the house that would be easy for me to like binge on. I just don't eat those or have them in the house. But I do live in Las Vegas and I eat out all the time. That's like my favorite thing to do here in Vegas is go to like cool restaurants that I find. And so I will have something, but if I'm gaining, then I don't. I just say, hey, I'm not going to eat it this week, and I'll do extra cardio, always working out. And so it's just something you have to have like self accountability to it too. And I do think that is important for you to be able to do those things if you're going to be intuitively weigh yourself. Say, okay, maybe I'm going a little too far. Like have those conversations with yourself.
Yeah, and just to go off of what you said about weighing yourself, in addition to being okay with checking in every few days or weighing yourself, just holding yourself accountable, you also have to know that you're not someone that obsesses too much over the number either. Because, when your eating is inconsistent, your weight might be a little inconsistent. And although it's good to track it so we can pull back, if you know that you're someone that's going to freak out if you're up a pound and you're just going to be so hard on yourself, then maybe it's not for you. You gotta allow yourself some grace with that, but also know when to, pull back a bit and like, oh, we're getting too far off.
Yeah, that's good to clarify that because it is. I will have. So I usually weigh like for me, it's like 192 to like 194 is like my happy zone. When I start getting like 196, it's like when I start becoming Fat Adam. And I'm like, okay, I'm moving a little bit more than I want to be moving around in the belly. So when I get to like the 185s, it's like, okay, Fit Adam, I'm doing a lot of extra work to stay fit, but my cruising place is like 91, 94, anything past it. I'm like, okay, I got to pull it back a little bit. So you'll find your spot that's like good for you, where you're comfortable, where you can maintain with relative ease. I can maintain, there's no reason I should go above that. I can maintain that with really relative ease. So, but so I'm within about 4 pounds or so, but it will be up and down a couple pounds. Some days I'm 191, some days even 189. And then when I get to like 194, I'm like, okay, just watch it, and if I get to like the 96s or so, I'm like, okay, is this fat? Is this muscle? I'll measure it. And I'm like, all right, that's not muscle. Fat Adam's going to be right around the corner at 200 pounds. And you just don't want to let yourself get to that point, right? You just don't want to get to the point. It's much easier, guys, to be self-aware and to lose 2 pounds than it is to be not aware and lose 10.
Yeah.
That's where I don't want to be losing 10 pounds. I don't want to have to do that. 4 pounds, cool, no problem. 2 pounds, all right. But don't let yourself get to that point. And then it's just so easy. You're just like, all right, diet for a couple of weeks. I just don't eat out, do a little more cardio. All right, I'm down those 2-3 pounds. Let's go have a chicken sandwich somewhere, right? So it's that type of thing. So that's how I'm doing mine now. I make sure I get enough protein in. Now, of course, I put myself in a different bracket because I'm not competing anymore. So it'd be much different if I was. So if I was actively competing, this option would be only like during off seasons, and I'd still be extra careful that I'm getting at least the protein requirements in.
Yes. So another, I guess, requirement of this type of dieting would be someone that's experienced, right? Unlike the beginner, this person has to be pretty darn good with nutrition, makes good estimations, right? And just knows overall like what's the good stuff, what's not, because you'd be surprised if you talk to some people that they think one thing's healthy and it's this many calories, only to find out it's twice that.
Yeah. That's the the peanut butter people, we call them, people who think peanut butter is a protein option. Right?
Oh, I never heard that.
The peanut butter people, the PPPs, like, well, they'll be like, yeah, oh no, I get a lot of protein. I eat a lot of peanut butter, and like that. Those, the kind of difference of someone who's just starting, who doesn't really know, versus someone who's like, oh yeah, I get a lot of protein. I eat egg whites. I eat chicken breast. Like, you're like, okay, you just, that's the difference of mentality. So yeah, we run into a lot of it as coaches, and you'd be surprised, which is definitely like the most rewarding part of the job, when you have someone who doesn't really get it in the beginning, and then at the end they're like experts. So
yeah.
But when you get to that point of prepping and checking in for like a year, I mean, the clients I have that are doing intuitive, they do so good intuitively. When I'm just like, hey, why don't you try this? If I'm saying, why don't you try this for a week or 2 weeks just to give you a break, it's because I trust that you could do it. And you're not someone who checks in and is like, disappears for 2 weeks and then they come back and they're up 10 pounds. It's probably not for you if you're that person. If you're my client, I would be like, I don't think that's going to go so well. Let's just be realistic. But if you're someone who's super consistent all year, I'm like, yeah, give them a diet break. Give them 2 weeks of just relaxing and getting off. And then you come back and you're super motivated again. You're like, okay, that was a nice break. Put my feet up for a little bit, had a couple chicken sandwiches. I don't know why chicken sandwich is my thing today, but I'm meaning like fried chicken sandwiches, not like chicken sandwiches are fine any other day. and then they feel good and they're ready to go back at it again. So maybe that'd be another person we could put in this bracket as someone who could do it. Is someone who needs a little bit of a diet break,
Yeah. And you said something there that is very important. Someone that's consistent, someone that you can trust, like have a cheat meal and they're not going to come back like, oops, I accidentally had a whole buffet.
Yeah.
Like if you're the type that doesn't even like cheat meals because every time you have a cheat meal, it just makes you want more, then this is probably not for you either, because just like intuitive eating, cheat meals can go the same way. Some people love cheat meals. They can stay within that range, whether it's 600 calories, you can tell them 600 calories, they stay within it, or a burger and fries, they'll stay and have that. But then there's also the type that's like, you say you're 600 calories and they're like, I had the good stuff and I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And then 600 calories turned into 1600, and then 1600 turned into 6,000. Well, that's a bit much, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can go.
It can go to 6,000. It could, not in a day probably, but over the week for sure. Yeah.
In the weekend.
Yeah. It's and what's great is you just have to find out who you are and be realistic with yourself. I love that part about coaching, because once in a while, it's not too common, but I've had a couple, I would say it's probably a few times a year though, where I'll have a client who I'll give like free meals to or cheat meals to. And then they just write me and they just tell me, hey, I don't want a free meal anymore or a cheat meal anymore, because it ends up turning into like something big. So can you just can we just do more calories per day? And I'm like, yeah, whatever's better for you,
Mhm.
whatever's better for the client. And so it's pretty simple. You just take the calories, you divide it up, and you just add in, this is how much it's going to equal per day. And you get an extra, whatever, cup of rice type of thing per day versus that cheat meal. And if you ever want to change it back, we could change it back. And then, sometimes they do, but most of the time they're just like, I'm happy with eating my food. Like
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good at being a robot. I like being the robot. I'm consistent. And so people just like it that way, so
Mhm.
you find what's better for you.
Yeah. You have to be okay with that lack of structure because, you're kind of guiding your own self. So some people are okay with that and can do it a little more independently for a little bit, but others you kind of need to tell them what to do. Otherwise, they'll just not know what to do and go off the deep end. But I think ultimately this person needs to like live the life.
Yeah.
These are usually the people that are good with this are the people that look closer all year round, perhaps, and don't go and have these big fluctuations because they just live the life. They're the type that's like, hey, you can have this cheat meal if you want to, but they choose not to just because they live the life. They like to eat healthy, they like to work out, they like to stay lean, they like their body a certain way. And to them, it's just like taking a shower.
Yeah. I like that you put lives the life. I think that's probably the biggest thing,
Yeah.
honestly. Someone who's really cares about you have people when we'll say they kind of visit fitness throughout the year, but they're not like fitness, like they don't live fitness. Like you live fitness, I live fitness. And they have people who kind of visit it throughout the year. Oh, I'm going to get in shape for a show and I'm going to work really hard for 16 weeks. The rest of the year, I'm going to work out. No one ever has a problem working out. Everyone works out, but the diet is completely different. It's not a bodybuilder diet, right? It's like so far from a bodybuilder diet. So I would say this is going to be for the people who live the life. They're always consistent to some degree. To most, most of their meals are protein considerate. Like they're like, oh, I got to get protein in every meal. I got to, not go crazy in my calories. They're always thinking about it. They're always conscious of it. I think that is a very important one. Yeah. Because if you're most of those people who are not living the life are already intuitively eating. They're just not intuitively eating like a bodybuilder. They're just kind of, and there's a difference of intuitively eating, just eating whatever you want, whenever you want. Like there's a big difference. Like intuitive eating as a bodybuilder, it still has its purpose. You got to get your protein in. Maybe some days your protein will be like, for me, I feel good at about 200 grams of protein. So, but for me, some days I only get in 120. And if I do that for a while, I actually could feel it like in the gym. I'm like, oh man, I'm like weaker. My muscles aren't as full. I've probably been a little bit low in my protein, so I got to get my protein up. Calorie wise, I don't see as big a difference besides like a little bit of energy in the gym, but it's just because I'm low on calories. That's really all it is if I'm dieting down. And I could be smart about that, and I'll just eat some more calories. But the protein one, I definitely will see. So bodybuilding intuitively eating is different than regular intuitive eating because you still have to take into consideration, hey, I'm still trying to have these goals, and protein requirements is probably the biggest one out of that,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. So you have to be really in tune with your body as well. I like what you just said. You said you felt weaker if you didn't get enough protein.
Yeah. Like
You're very in tune.
Yeah,
You're very in
the
tune with
muscles
yourself.
it's a really weird thing. It's like a water balloon almost, like, and you just don't have as much water as you usually do. Like the muscles just don't feel as good. You don't get as good of a pump. You don't look as big. And it's like, it happens pretty quick. And then you eat the protein again. You're like, okay, I just needed a fill up. I just needed, the gas was a little low. So it's crazy. Yeah. But that's a good thing. You do got to be in tune with your body. And this is a good time to really get in tune with your body too, when you're intuitively eating, because you could kind of find out, what does my body digest well too? I'm trying all these different foods. Do I do better with whatever carb, whatever fat, whatever protein? How's my regularity, right? Are you still regular? Or are you eating foods and then all of a sudden you're not anymore? So you kind of pick up some information that you can use for prep so you get a little bit more experiment time.
Yeah, that's really good. And it kind of teaches you to be a normal person in a way, because we can't assume you're going to be a competitor your whole life. So when that time comes, it's nice to not be so married to the scheduled eating and have some, I guess, confidence with going on your own and being able to eat like a normal person without an actual menu plan, just kind of trusting yourself with it. So, it's kind of, it's a good thing to try for sure. Definitely not going to work when you're prepping, but in the off season, give it a go.
Yeah. Even if it's
just a week.
Yeah. That's the thing too. That's even if it's a week, like a month you're doing it and you want to break, or a week, just a week. I had a lot of people do it from, I guess I should have done this earlier, but like the week of Christmas to New Year's. Right. And it's just a lot of my consistent clients who did that really had no problem. They came back like pretty much some are up half a pound, some are down a little bit. I find that the more people who eat intuitively that are gaining are always losing weight. Like it's so, because if you're listening to hunger cues and they're in week 16 of gaining, the calories are so high at that point and kind of to the point where you're like, you have to eat more than you want to eat, that when they go intuitively eat that first week, 2 weeks, they're like, I don't even want to eat. Like, I'm just going to eat my protein and they're all dieting down. It's so funny. They're all cutting and they're like, I felt like I ate. I'm like, no, it's hard to eat. Like if you're a female, 120 pounds or so, and your menu plan's up to, 2,800 calories, like it seems like it's not that much food. But once you come off the rigorous like schedule of having to eat 2,800 calories, you don't normally just eat 2,800 calories of good food. It's pretty hard to do. People underestimate it so much. And they're like, yeah, I guess I was eating like 1,800 calories the whole time. And I'm like, yeah, that's about what most people will do. Like it's so, but if it's the other way, it's totally different because you've been dieting and then the hunger cues are way high, like we talked about. So then those are the ones that do eat, 3,500 every day and gain weight. So it's so funny how I've seen it go. If hunger cues are the thing, when you work up your metabolism, your hunger cues are just not the same. When you work up your metabolism, you're eating and you're gaining, you're in a lean gaining phase than when you're dieting. It's just so different. So.
Yeah. I do a modified version of intuitive eating. I would say it's not, I don't know if I'd consider this.
I call you an eyeball prepper.
Eyeball prepper. That's what we're going to go with, an eyeball prepper. So the way I kind of think of it in my mind is I'll have like a calorie limit. So let's say for the off season, 1,800 that's calorie limit. And I say limit because I don't want to exceed it, but I can go under it. And I want to bring a point to be, I don't eat unless I'm hungry in the off season. Okay. Unless there's certain scenarios where I will, and that's like a post workout, or let's say like if whatever reason I was literally not hungry for all day and I didn't have anything, and obviously I'm not going to starve myself is basically what I'm saying. But my first thing is I have to ask myself, are you actually hungry before you eat this? Or are you having a craving? Most of the time it's just a craving. So chew gum, drink Diet Coke or whatever I need to do to satisfy that craving. But yeah, I'll do a modified version of it. But I also keep in mind protein. I have to have a lot of protein. I try to limit empty calories just like as a little guideline there. And I like to think of my meals like in either 2s or 3s for calories. I know this sounds silly, but I'll have 4 base meals a day, no matter what, whether I'm in season or off season. And I like to consider a base meal like just a protein rich meal that's low carb, low fat, just like a protein, like chicken veggie, for example, or a muscle egg. That's a base meal for me. And then depending on my, calories in the off season, I can just add on to that. So if I want to do like a 200 calorie pack of cashews and add on to that. So I think that's how I do it though. I think of like in 2s or 3s because I don't overcomplicate it with this is 260 calories and then the other one is 120. I round up or down. But yeah, so I kind of do a modified version of this, but not to the exact of this.
Yeah. And I think that's good that people see that too, because I do think when people can't relate to you, they think it's because you're a robot 100% of the time. And you're always like measuring every grain of rice and you're always doing cardio 5 times a week. And you're just in this, like, you're just this robot fitness machine that I think people's interpretation of what it takes for them to get lean and to get ready for a show, they think you do that 24/7. Right. And I'm like, no, like there'd be no way for her to maintain what she's been doing to do it that way. She has to do these breaks. Yeah, she's getting her protein in. She still always works out. Everyone always works out. That's never an issue. I always say that, but she's not like this crazy fitness prep robot where it's,
in the off season, wing broccoli, like, nope, not me.
Yeah. She's in, not doing her cardio like in the off season where it's like, daily, maybe a couple times a week, if that, sometimes during the off season. It's so you can do it and you can live that lifestyle where you're staying lean. And I think that that's the best example is that you're staying lean, but you're not going crazy with what you have to do to stay lean. And I think people disconnect from that.
Yeah.
And they think it's so hard, but it's really not, it's really not. Maintenance calories is, it may be a little bit above maintenance calories is not hard to do. It's a lot of food, it's a lot of food, but if you're eating a lot of bad food or a lot of foods with like, tons of ingredients in it where you're not getting full, then yeah, it's not that much food. You'll never get, like I said, you'll never get full in that stuff. So I think that's a great that you say that,
Yeah.
that people understand, hey, well, wait a minute. She's like most winning girl ever, right? How is she able to stay lean? And then she's intuitive eating and she's not doing that much cardio. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, well, how come I can't do that?
Yeah.
Like, it's not anything that anyone can't do, even with a busy schedule. So I'm glad that you talk about that.
Yeah, I feel like I cracked the code a little bit here just for myself. I'm not saying how I do things will work for everyone, but I feel like for myself personally, I found something that works for me that I'm able to maintain through the year. And of course, when I'm prepping for a show, that's when I get stricter. But for the most part, this is how my diets work. Gain weight, eat less. And calories in, calories out kind of thing, and move more and
Shocker.
Shocker. when I like to have like a little limit for myself. So whenever I do reach that limit, then I really try to be extra careful and be mindful of, my activity and what I'm eating and all that. So I'm just a little more strict as I get closer to shows and I eat less, but in the off season I eat a little more. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is that simple, right? People overestimate it. It's exactly how you said. Move more, eat less, move more. It's in season, off season, gaining and cutting. So it's just a matter of timing that right, not overdoing it. But yeah, it's I'm glad that you said that. That's really funny, actually. Even at the highest level, guys, it breaks down to simple things.
Yes, and and just have to be aware of it too, though, because I even told you, Adam, like, don't let me get too far beyond, what I'm comfortable with. But as long as you keep that in check, we're in a good spot.
And I think it's good for you guys to hear too, because we try to keep Ashley looking on that 6 to 8 week out range, because her 8 week out range is most people's like 12 week out efforts kind of thing. It's hard for Ashley to get lean, easier for her to stay lean, but harder for her to get lean. So we also have to take into account, what are your genetics, you have great genetics and structure and all that, but you don't have the best genetics at growing muscle. You don't have the best genetics at losing fat, So everyone has their workaround. So you got to find what works good for you. So we even checked in earlier today, right? Just about an hour ago. And, we're like, okay, this is about where we want to be. And we don't want to get too much softer than this. And then, right now we need 8-ish weeks of dieting to get you ready for a show, whenever that is. So yeah, it's kind of, because it could be, the problem is that 6 to 8 weeks could be 9, we don't know, it's different every time.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of who you are too. Yes.
And that's very important, because again, I'm telling you how I do things, but I don't ever expect it to apply to everyone. I've been on the opposite side of it, and I've been a foodie so much to where I was just obsessed with food and I loved to eat. And all I thought about was eating. And like I said, at that time, there was no way I could ever do an intuitive eating plan. But now I'm more, in tune with my body and knowing what my hunger cues are and how I function, what nutrition it takes to fuel my workouts. Like, I'm so in tune with my body these days that it's a totally different story. So although you might not be to that point yet, that doesn't mean that in the future you can't kind of train yourself to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an evolution, and it's funny, the longer you do plans, you kind of have this like self-conscious governing like mind that will kind of tell you, like, you're like, it's almost your taste buds too, like now when I eat a steak, if it's got too much fat in it, I'm like, oh, I don't even want to eat that. It's gross. Yeah. Like, I don't know if it's like a eating disorder thing where I'm like, I just can't eat that much fat, or if it's actually, I feel like it's just the taste. Like, it's gross to me now to have a steak that's like that fatty, or to have a piece of bread with a ton of butter on it. I went to, with my mom was in town. We went to the Top of the World restaurant at the Sphere, and they had this bread and it had so much butter on it. I was like, oh, that's gross. Like, it just tastes different. I don't know if it's a self-governing agent for doing this for so long, or if it's just the taste actually at a certain point just comes kind of gross when you're eating like that. I don't know. But yeah.
No, I'm with you. I feel like it, and I think we kind of associate that to like feeling like poo-poo afterwards too.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, I've been eating so clean for so long. Now I know if I eat these loaded nachos, I'm not going to feel the best after. So maybe it's ourselves like protecting, like, we know how we're going to feel after this. Let's just not.
Yeah. Right. Because you would probably, even though the intuitive eating would probably, I guess, allow that. Well, I wouldn't even think of that. But if someone was eating some, I would have one. just to get like the taste. You'd be probably the
Yeah.
same. But yeah, sitting there eating a big old thing. Maybe that's what sets us up good for vegan intuitive eaters. I don't know, but you got to find out where you're at, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very, very person by person basis, and definitely comes with its challenges, but also its benefits as well. So, mostly I think it just is a little reset to you, a nice little diet break without a diet break, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So ideally, in a perfect world, you'd be eating the same as what your diet would say, the same macros and calories. But again, with intuitive eating, sometimes there's a little more margin of error there. So
Yeah.
It is a nice little reset, though, a nice little mental break, so you don't have to think about, oh, I got to eat my chicken and broccoli at later, and it's just like I'll let my taste buds and my stomach guide me, but within reason.
Yeah, and that's a good synopsis of it, actually.
Yes. So, and I also think that it can be beneficial too. Like, let's say you're going on vacation or holiday, you don't want to think about what you need to bring and what you need to eat. Just let's see when we get there, what the hunger is like. But also, I also want to point this out as well. I think a lot of people overestimate how much they think they need to eat, like at that exact moment in time. Like, think about this. Our body doesn't really know it's a 24-hour like day. It doesn't really think like that a lot of times, meaning you don't have to like fit all the meals in within that time period and then it resets the next day. There's some carryover. Did I word that correctly?
Yeah, okay. You got there. At the end, you got there. Yeah, it's people. I think a lot of people, it's weird how people do think about that. And you got it exactly right. You have one on and one off switch. When you're conceived, you're on. When you die, you're off. That's it. You got one on, one off. Other than that, you're just on. It's a light bulb that just don't want to burn out. So think about that's how your calories are. That's how you're eating. We go to sleep and we think, okay, it's a new day. I have X amount of calories, but it's really an average over time is what we're looking at, over a period of a month. What was it? It'd be great if we could do calories for the month, and then kind of, because that's how it would pretty much work. If you did like calories for the month, that's how your body kind of works. So, it's an average of things. And so that's what you're doing with intuitive eating is one day you're at 3,000 calories, one day you're at 1,200 calories, and one day, whatever, but you averaged to, let's say 1,800 calories a day. But the good thing is you always got your X protein average. Like you're at for let's say Ashley, 150 grams of protein a day is kind of her marker. And some days she was 160, some days she was 130, but that one is always really close.
Yes.
That one's always really close. Ashley's a good eyeballer of her proteins.
Yes.
So
if anything, you got to make sure that macro, at least there's enough of that. Now with fats and carbs, it's kind of like, whatever.
How hungry are you?
Yes, like
exactly. How hungry are you?
But the protein shouldn't really fluctuate.
Not for the bodybuilding intuitive eating version. Yeah, It should be very similar. So, yeah, there you go.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So is that a wrap on this already?
I think that's a
good job. Is there if you guys have any questions, now would be a good time. But I think that's a good wrap. There's a lot of good info out there on it. But I think the important one is, like Ashley said, identify a craving versus actual hunger. Make sure that you're hydrated, because most people will confuse being dehydrated with being hungry. So another thing, if you're eating, you're eating too much, even if you're in a prep diet, you're prepping right now and you feel like you're always really hungry, make sure you're hydrated, because most people are dehydrated to some degree. So I believe I saw the number once. I wish I could look it up. I saw the number once. It was 72% of people are somewhat dehydrated at least. So that hunger is getting confused. That dehydration is being confused a lot with hunger. So anyway, with that, I guess leave questions in the comments and we'll get back to them. But thank you guys so much for tuning in.
All right. I'll catch you next week.
Catch you next week.